It's in there, it's in there. We'll get to that.
So, okay, so Peter, those are all the comments you
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we delete Appendix B from the board policy manual. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay.
Okay.
I have just been reminded that we can go through this, and when we adopt it as our board policy manual, we need to exclude section 5.14 on page number 25, because that's the sunshine clause where the law is changed. So we will get that from HR and incorporate that into the new manual.
I'll send it over first thing tomorrow.
All right, thank you.
And there were no comments from the other directors about that, so that should be a pretty clean swap.
Great.
Is there anything else in here that anybody wants to discuss? You did?
Ron had a lot of changes.
No, I just wanted there was one here that Rick should have put in here about us not contacting legal counsel direct. And the thing, that's fine, but I just want to try to. I have so many of these red dots. I don't even know where this.
I know which one you're talking about. I just have the section.
There was one where I had written just the exception in case, because we don't want a board member to think there's some type of misconduct to go to like a district attorney or law enforcement authorities without going through our legal counsel first. And there might not be an alternative there.
Well, my intent was that
I just don't want anyone to go outside of our organization or anything like that without first contacting the board president and legal, so we can put something like that.
part of it had to do, and it didn't happen with this board, but we've had an instance where somebody on the board just called up legal counsel, and then we got the bill, and you're going, wow.
Right, so I think we're talking about page 43, by the way.
Okay.
Good man.
All right.
43.
43. I believe it's the bold text there that Director Solano's.
All right.
I don't think it's 43.
No,
that's
40,
communication.
Article 12.
You have a different version or something than that.
Do I have a different version?
Yeah. Page 42.
Yes, it's 42, page 42.
This was the packet that we printed off of. Article 12, is that what we're talking about?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but I remember that add-on that Rex had in there, and I don't know why it's not in here.
Well, that's not the one you
Which
started.
add-on? There is an add-on from law.
No, I know, but Rex added on another part to this stuff.
What they basically said is that if somebody on the board of directors wants to contact our district legal counsel, go through the chief or the president or one of those two so that we know that you contacted them. Because we've gotten a bill before where one of the board of directors had talked for, I don't know, half an hour or an hour to legal counsel, and next thing we know, we got a bill going, what was that all about?
That's in the bold section, just above the red section.
On 42?
Yeah, you've added it, yeah.
Oh, maybe I didn't do the red.
Oh,
That is,
yeah,
yeah.
that's blame it on you.
Yeah, that's my fault.
It's there.
Yeah. All right.
No, it's there.
Does anybody have any objections to that?
No, and I think it's
That's fine.
a really good discipline because, you know, for board members to be able to independently sort of run the clock on either legal counsel or staff, other than Michelle, Michelle works for us, and the chief works for us, and those are the only two people who work for the board. Everybody else works for the chief.
Right.
You're advisor to the board, but you're advisor to the board as a board, not to us as individuals.
Yes. So I think just to clarify, we work for the board as well, but not for individual members.
Not for individual members. And so this is, I think, a good check and balance. And I have to remind myself, the other day I wanted some information about Station 6. I came in, the chief wasn't here. I went to John Hitchcock and I said, John, can you just send me some files? If it's going to take any time, tell me and I'll go ask permission. And he said, I can send them to you, it won't take any time. But I think we all need to be sensitive to that we can't just go rack up staff time or legal counsel time.
And that was kind of my point. And if you want, staff is more than willing, if you have questions about anything, it's here or on the agenda or on a board meeting packet, to answer your questions. But you can't just walk into their office and take up 2 hours of the time, because if you make an appointment, they'll be more than happy to meet with you. But there may be something that they're supposed to be doing during that 2 hours, and they try to accommodate us as much as they can.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons, and I want to thank the staff for this, because I know it's not easy, that we asked them to get the board package out early, so that, given the fact that they're not here on Fridays,
Yes.
get the board package out so that people who have questions have the opportunity to get those questions answered before the board meeting. And I would, again, would urge people to do that. If it's related to an agenda topic and you have a clarifying question, please handle it offline so we can go through the agenda more quickly.
So any other comments on this?
Yeah,
Chuck has
I have some.
Okay.
On page 12, there's some things about the board. I focus mostly on the board's conduct here, but I guess that's what the whole thing's supposed to be about. But I don't think we've added any clarity here. I'm not against what the intention is, but I don't understand what the intention is, because the wording is kind of permissive here. It says prior approval may be made, but does it have to be made? And it's just not clear to me whether a board member must have prior approval or not.
What paragraph now?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's in red.
It's the highlighted in red.
Under external training.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So I'm not sure, were you suggesting, well, this is you, Rex.
Well, as I read it, the previous sentence is the existing sentence saying that if a board member wants to do this, then it must notify the board. What Rex has added is, in addition to notifying the board, you actually have to have approval.
It doesn't say, it said it may be.
Well, you may or may not get approval, is what I think was the intention.
Okay. I'd like to clarify in any case. I'm not arguing any points here.
Well, he's going to sign it, right, to approve those expenses.
Does he
Well,
have to approve it?
Chuck makes the point that may
Rex has to sign it.
Then it may should be must.
should be
Okay, that's
must.
fine.
Okay. Does anybody have any problem if we change may to must?
No,
If
I
that's
love
what you
must.
mean, if that's what you mean by it.
Okay, then we'll change may to must.
Okay, and then on the next page, 14, just a quick question. When I came on the board, one of the things that, there was some talk that I might get in addition to this iPad, was some sort of, I can't remember the exact term, but it was some sort of an electronic device, like a radio or a scanner.
Well, they're talking about a scanner.
Yeah, but I don't think that was the word that was used. It doesn't matter. I don't know that the board needs any of that stuff, by the way, but is that still being given out?
No,
You have the one-way radio?
no.
Well,
I have one.
a one-way radio, you have a scanner.
I've got it, yeah,
Yeah, the-
Virginia and I have the small pager scanners.
Yeah, I used to have one, but I used to have actually a radio scanner, and when I left the board, I turned it in, and I think this policy now prevails. Those of you who've been on for a while may simply be holdovers from when the old policy was to give people.
So bottom line, Chuck, do you want that?
That's true.
No, I don't want one. I'm saying, somebody said, oh, you gotta get it, so it's one of those things that got in my mind, like, oh, I gotta stop by the office and get one of these someday. But this is suggesting that we don't need
It's
these.
exciting for about 10 minutes.
But I'm sure the chief will afford it.
Are you giving these out anymore to board members, or?
Scanners?
We give you the little pager.
That's what I'm talking about, I don't know.
That's it. Well, I think we were waiting for a director to turn one in. I'll have to talk to John Hitchcock, but it's supposed to be, we get one
To what
back,
end?
we give it to the,
To what end do we have them? What do we do with
to listen to them? That's it, just to listen to them.
I'll tell you where this came from. Not this
There were
board.
radios at one point.
Not the one before it, but back a ways, we actually had a board of director that had an equipment radio and could communicate with county, and I'm going, no.
Okay.
That's a
As
lot
board of
control.
directors, I don't think it's appropriate for us to be on the air with emergency response vehicles. You shouldn't be able to talk to them. So it came on is that if you want to listen to them, that's fine, and monitor the calls, but
If anybody's interested, the best way to know what's going on is just, there's a website called Fire Dispatch.
yeah.
Right,
You go on Fire Dispatch, it's instantaneous, and can tell you which engine's been dispatched to what purpose, et cetera, et cetera.
It actually has audio.
I'm suggesting that we don't need any of this equipment, so
And that's what I think it says.
Can we leave it in until we make sure we got it all back?
I'm suggesting to the chief, I don't think we need to buy new ones or renew those things for board members.
Understood. At the time, not everybody going away from what was done, which was pagers and radios. This was a step backwards, but not completely out.
Okay.
Alright.
And then on the next page, page 16, this is a question that I brought up, actually, that didn't actually get factored in here. I think that first sentence on the page, Article 4, is a broken sentence. I think, I'm not quite sure what it, but I think after the word terms, board terms, there should be a period, if I'm not mistaken. Otherwise, I had the very first, right under Article 4, that very first introductory sentence on page 16.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the first one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the very
just the first
first.
sentence.
Under the
Okay.
title. I can't quite scan it, but anyway, I think maybe after the word terms, it should be a period.
Oh, yeah, I think you're right.
But that's not really the issue here.
Well, but it needs to be corrected.
And what concerned me, and I mentioned this to Virginia, is that when we came into office, we didn't follow what was in and what's still in this procedure here. It wasn't clear to me exactly when we were supposed to take office, whether it was January 1st or the middle of December. But we were sworn in the middle of December. New officers were elected in December. We had meetings, important meetings in December. And yet the policy says that none of that happens until January. And I don't have a horse in this race, I don't really care. It's just, we didn't do what the procedure is.
I think that you're right, and I would suggest that this first sentence stop after the month of December, period, and then you strike the rest of that. To elect officers of the board during the month of December, period.
The best question is, Peter, when do they take over?
That's not our policy. That is up to the elections
County
law.
had the elections.
The election law is that you take office after you have been certified as having been elected.
Okay, so there's two issues, but the wording here that where you cut it off, they elect officers of the board in December. So do those officers take their seats in January, or do they take their seats in December?
We take our seats not based on what the board policy is, but based on what the election policy is.
No, but what he's saying is it's a non-election year. There's no election, we aren't seating any new board members. This upcoming year, we are going to change president and vice president. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, I'm saying all of that. In other words, I'm not sure when new board members are supposed to take office. That's one thing that's not clear to me.
That's an election board. That's county elections officer decision, not ours.
But how do they communicate what the decision is to us?
What's the election law?
When does the election law say we take it? I don't know.
After the election's been certified. That's a different issue from when the board officers are appointed by the board.
I don't think what you're saying is precisely true. I don't think necessarily people take office after certification. I don't think that's really the law.
I think Michelle knows.
In my past lives and other organizations that I've worked with, when there's an election in November, the newly elected council members, board members, what have you, start office January 1st.
That's what I thought.
That's
Not Menlo Park City Council, well, or, I mean, it could be different.
I'm just speaking from experience on the other boards that I've clerked at. I'm just
So
not-
we were discussing very important matters at the end of December,
Right.
where maybe we weren't legal. We had officers who'd been elected and were serving before their term even began. I'm just saying that we weren't doing it in the right way, and I don't care how we do it, we ought to just know what the dates
Well,
are.
I see
my
what you're
understanding, and council and is that we are elected once our election has been certified. Now, I know that there are some bodies that do not seat their elected officials until the 1st of January. We have always seated our elected officials once the election has been certified.
Yeah, I think that that is up to the board as to, I think that people can be seated at any point after the election has been certified. I think there is some flexibility there. And this year, so you were not legal board members at the end of December. You were a fully functioning member of the board.
To say it another way, 2 conditions have to be met to be seated as a board member. 1, you have to be elected, and 2, you have to be sworn in. And some entities don't swear people in until the 1st of January. We swear people in as soon as they've been certified.
Well, with all due respect to Jack, who's here, and it's possible if there were an issue where people disagreed over it, it's possible that an outgoing board member could insist on completing their term, which would be December 31, and we could have a dispute. I just think that we somehow, one, we should research what's the law on this. Second, we ought to define what our policy is.
The term is defined by the elections code as until their successor is elected. That's what the election code says. Now, I'm quoting it from memory. I'm prepared to be corrected, but I think that the term is not set by calendar year, but the term is set by until their successor is elected. And that takes into consideration the fact that there could be situations where the elections board cannot certify a particular, let's say the 3rd candidate out of 3, because the race is still undecided because of uncounted votes. And so would certify the first 2 and then go into a recount, et cetera, for the 3rd. The first 2 could be seated because they've been certified. The 3rd person would not be seated. And the person who, how one would decide would be the sitting member who wasn't certain, who would continue, I don't know. But at least the 2 people would be seated.
May I suggest, just rather than us beating this around, I think it would be a good idea.
Given our lack of knowledge.
I think it would be a good idea to reaffirm exactly what the election law says. And regardless of what the election law says, I tend to agree with Director Bernstein that this is, whatever this is trying to say, it's not clear. So I would suggest that you set this article aside for purposes of tonight, and we come back to this after we've had a chance to look at it and advise you on it. That would be my recommendation, rather than trying to arrive at language.
Let me make a counter suggestion. That, as we usually do, we make whatever changes we can in this document, we approve it, and then we ask you to come back with a revision that we will then vote on at that time, so that in the absence, we've still got a manual.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to suggest that just for this section, if you just leave it alone for now, we deal with
that's the net effect of what I'm saying.
Right.
Could I ask you to do 2 things, though?
Absolutely.
One is to deal with the term of the officers, the term of the directors, when a new director is seated and so forth.
Right.
The second is, if you could suggest wording that just would make sense about when our new officers take over.
Your new officers in terms of president, vice president, et cetera.
Exactly. That's consistent with the first part, depending on when the new officers are seated.
So recognize, for example, when you and I came on the board, Steve Nachtheim was the current president. The moment we came on the board, he was no longer a board member. So the 2 have to be connected. The board member issue and the member.
And that's why I was adding the second thing. I think both of them need to be in sync here. So
Yeah, because technically his elected term wasn't up until it was done.
And he wasn't a board member anymore.
Yeah, you could, and the president says here in January, well, if you're not a board member, you can't be the president.
The other place that this shows up, by the way, is on the very end of this document in the calendar of events.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I have a couple, I'll try to be quick on these.
You're looking at it with fresh eyes. Keep going.
On page 20, Virginia has a change here, and I'm not opposed to it in any way, but I just was curious what the rationale or what the meaning of it is.
I just, it's kind of, to me, it was a reiteration that the majority of the board that, votes on something is actually a board decision. And so that the folks who are in the minority can't just go out and say, oh, I didn't vote for this, or I voted for that, even though it was against the majority. We've seen that.
Wait a minute, now wait a minute. If that's what you mean by this, I'm opposed to it, because we've had this discussion years ago. When a board makes a decision, it is the board's decision.
Right.
But that will not, I don't think that can or should preclude an individual who disagreed with it for expressing the fact that they disagreed with it.
Right, that's not what I'm saying.
That's what you just said, though.
What I'm saying is that the board decision is the board decision. And you can't just go out like a closed session and say, well, I voted this way. I didn't vote with the board.
It can be a board decision, maybe too.
Right.
I think, I'm
We can
glad Chuck has
clarify.
learned this. I would not accept the substitute language, given the way that you explained it. I think the
Okay.
way it stands now is fine. But to try to silence the minority, I
I'm
find
not trying
unacceptable.
to silence the
You
minority.
just said, you can't walk out and say, I voted the other way.
Well, you can't in closed session, for
But then,
example.
No.
that's a separate.
In closed session,
Separate seclusion.
if you vote in closed session, the vote has to be disclosed by name, by law. So you're doing exactly what you said you can't do. The law requires you to report out of closed session votes by name.
Is that right? Because that's not what I've heard in
That's
our
right.
closed sessions before. That
I
that
need
the
to-
board decision was the board decision.
Now, a vote in closed session, you must record it by name, who voted which way.
I frankly don't know that off the top of my head. I need
Okay,
to confirm
so
it.
that is not what I understood in previous closed sessions, but I'm not trying
Regardless,
to.
I don't think that that's what this, I mean, if
I'm not trying to silence the minority, though, because there have to be,
No, that's right.
what,
The clerk believes that's correct,
which is correct.
which is,
This is like Jeopardy.
Wait, what is
Just like
correct?
That if there is action taken by the board in closed session, it needs to be reported in open session by name, by how they
Okay,
vote.
that has not happened with this board in the past, since I've been on this board.
I can't remember that we've had split votes in closed session.
We
If it's
have,
unanimous.
this was right before y'all came on, we had split votes, and they were not reported by name.
Michelle, when you say by name, I mean, individual board members or
Yeah.
the board approved this, 3 votes to 2, that
And
A, B, and C were for, and
I'll have to check
D and E
the,
were against?
yeah, the ayes and the noes.
There was,
there were
Kind of
a
just
couple
how-
of closed sessions
there
where
were,
we
where we didn't,
did not report out in public by name. That's why I'm confused. I mean, I can go look for those meeting minutes.
I'm doing what Jenny was doing earlier, the curious thing.
This is when research comes in.
Right, we haven't had those
the Google
meetings.
Docs.
Sorry, I asked.
No.
No,
Google
no,
Docs.
and I'm not,
Let's get it cleared up so we don't
my
make a mistake.
intent was not to silence the minority, just so you know. But, we've had a couple meetings where closed session votes were not reported in open session by name, and that's maybe what was confusing.
Well, I
And
think
was
the law
told,
may have changed on it,
When in the
recently.
last 6
So
months,
now since, on January 1, 2014, the law may have changed.
To what?
Which, well, I'm not sure. So I'm not gonna give you a legal opinion on it here because
Yeah.
I don't know. And
Michelle believes that's correct.
okay, well then that,
But in any event, I think that that's, I mean, regardless, whatever that is, I think that you can still discuss the language you've suggested here and either add it or not add it.
I'm going to suggest, I think because of the possibility of misinterpretation,
yeah,
that
we can delete.
I would like to see that deleted.
Okay, that's fine. But I do want clarity on the issue that we were discussing because that, and I don't think that the laws changed that soon.
Here's the law, section 54-957.1. Report at conclusion of closed session. The legislative body of any local agency shall publicly report any action action taken in closed session, and the vote or abstention of every member present thereon.
Okay, then we have not followed that in a few of our closed session meetings. That I am certain of.
Well, again, I think the law may have changed, but
Does it say any updates there?
Pardon?
Does it have any updates? Either way, I mean, now we know.
I defer to council on updates. I'm only operating on that stuff I've got on my computer.
But given the fact that we are now having a lot of closed sessions, we need to be very clear on what that law is. And so if that's the law, then that is the law that we have to follow, which is fine. It was not the case in the last few closed sessions before the new rules.
Anything else?
Yeah, can I jump back a tiny bit? Page 19, the sentence just about above number 1.
Sentence
That-
above number- oh.
that starts with understand.
5.8, section 5.8.
It's 5.8, but it's the sentence just above number 1.
Understand.
I think the understand should be a numerical section here. In other words, I
So
believe
that should be number 1.
that should be number 1, and so the numbering system is off.
Yeah,
So,
by 1.
Can we fix it?
Yeah, that's easy.
Okay, and then on page 26,
Yes.
there's, Rob, this is you here, there's a whole elaborate thing about ombudsman and final decisions, and I don't understand what this is about, or what this means.
Yeah, and I had a question on that too, Rob. And I'm not opposed to it, I just love to know your intent of putting this
So let's hear what he's got to say.
Yep.
Well, since it involved top management and an exemption relative to the chief or management staff that are involved in some type of a complaint, that an ombudsman is kind of like a neutral overseer of a particular incident. And I thought that maybe instead of just to have that individual to oversee something that would involve misconduct by the chief or by his senior management staff.
So, but the district would, in a sense, represent or provide representation to these people?
No, that the ombudsman would be appointed by the district.
And paid for by the district, right?
To oversee if it's a situation of an incident or anything involving misconduct or something that needed to be investigated, that we had an outside agency to do that. And we kind of do it now with using legal counsel or by an investigator, but to bring it out, have something formalized.
So when you say by the district, who do you mean? Not the board, it's just the chief report to the board. And I'm just trying to understand.
The second to last sentence says, of these incidents, the fire board will have the final decision. But I don't know what that means. What decision does the fire board make?
Well, if there's a decision that needs to be made involving the incidents, the fire board will have the final decision relative to what action will be taken, either termination or
But I'm struggling with who the district is, who would appoint the ombudsman.
I'm confused, because, you're saying that the ombudsman would make the recommendation for termination or for discipline?
no. We, as a fire district, would make those determinations.
But that's outside the scope of what the board's stated purpose is. You've assigned that, you've delegated that authority to the fire chief under the board policies.
Well, what if it is the fire chief?
The fire chief can make that decision.
No, but what if it's misconduct of the fire chief? Then who's got
Then
the
you
final
as the-
decision? The
as-
fire board, right?
Just as to the fire chief.
Right,
Right.
that's why I'm asking when you say the fire district is appointing this person,
Well,
who
we
do you
can
define
cross
as the
out
fire, or
management
the
staff
fire
or its
district?
participants then, and just have the chief make that final decision.
That would be
Does that-
the most appropriate
Well,
sense.
that's fine.
Yeah.
I mean,
And in the last sentence where it says, this action does not limit the individual for a legal remedy, I'm not sure, what does that mean? You haven't deprived that person of due process?
well, that individual can bring a civil action against the district without any repercussions or problem areas.
I'd like to recommend that the whole concept here be referred to, rather than put this into wording.
No, that's
right now,
fine. I mean,
for an opinion from the legal counsel.
And to have Jenny
And
look
from,
at
and
it.
from human resources.
Well, I mean, frankly, so there's a couple things. One, I think this whole chunk really doesn't belong under responsibilities of the fire chief because it's talking about things the fire chief would not have responsibility for. But I also think that there are pieces of here that touch on elements of the safety personnel policies already, and also potentially, I mean, I guess this is focused on what would happen with the fire chief, but there are pieces in here that may end up being negotiated discipline procedures. So respectfully, I would suggest that none of this be added to the board policy.
I would agree with
Okay. I'm easy.
Does that require a vote then, or is
that.
that?
Yeah, so can I?
No, we just cross it out.
No, he's just,
Okay.
he's
Okay.
I think what we're gonna do is make all these changes and then have one vote at the end.
Yeah, that's
what
what
you
I,
said.
but that's what we
Okay.
haven't been doing that.
just like the first reading.
Right.
I have maybe 5 more, Rex, I'll try to go.
Go
On
for it.
page 27, top of the page, again, the part in red. I just want to ask the chief, so there's a planning, there's a succession planning needs to take place, and it says it'll be written and due January, no date, but January of each year, with employee name title for each specific classification. I'm not sure I understand what that means, but if you understand what that means, then maybe that's fine.
That's sort of infeasible because you can't specifically identify somebody for succession planning purposes because we're a civil service agency and we have to engage in the civil service examination process for any promotional opportunities and any job opportunities. We can come up with a general succession plan, but you can't plug in names for those positions in advance of offering those positions up for promotion or for people to submit their applications. It's got to be a competitive, open process.
Even in an acting position?
Even in an acting, I mean,
Okay.
if
Well, that's
for
fine.
succession planning purposes, we wouldn't have, I mean, I'm unclear how you would use an acting position for succession planning. That's not succession planning.
Well, it's succession planning if let's say, one of our battalion chiefs assigns a captain for his position or her position when they're not present or on vacation, and that captain knows that he or she will be taking that battalion chief's position.
We don't actually operate that way. When a battalion chief is out of the office or on vacation, they're required to get a backfill for their position. That could be filled by another battalion chief, by an acting battalion chief, or by one of our division chiefs.
Okay.
And that's really different than succession planning. Succession planning is looking to the future structure of the organization and planning out how we're going to provide the skills, experience, and training essential for current employees for future prospective opportunities. So we're really talking about 2 different things.
Well, not really, because I think the delegation of authority for different types of positions are part of succession planning, because that individual then has those skills, education, or training background in order to fill that position. So I think it is also a part of succession planning, and in order to have individuals fill those types of positions.
So that would be more career development. That's how we talk about that when we build people's skills and allow acting battalion chiefs or acting captains or acting division chief opportunities. That's career development with the purpose being served of succession planning. They're 2 different things though.
I would recommend here that it would be fine to have a report in January. If we're gonna have a meeting in February, then it makes sense that we need a report in January to go out, attack it and stuff.
But what I'm suggesting is that, and
We don't
again,
need
I
to
don't
name
mean
a
to be disrespectful, but from a personnel perspective, from an HR perspective, having an annual succession plan is not very strategic for the organization. If we want to come up with a succession plan, we're talking about long-term organizational structure planning. We're not talking about something that we do on an annual basis. Furthermore, because we are subject to a civil service examination process, it's really not feasible to identify specific individuals for specific positions in succession planning. What we can say is we have a plan to get X amount of acting battalion chiefs in the next 3 years, so that when we have these 3 anticipated retirements in 5 to 7 years, we'll have individuals who are qualified and ready to compete for those positions. So I would just encourage you to maybe talk about more of a less of an annual reporting and more of a one-time, let's come up with a broader plan and then sort of work towards implementing that.
And
You're
I
talking
think
about
that
something-
this is
It's the
pretty
responsibility of the fire chief and the board.
Right.
He just once a year says, hey, here's a report about succession planning.
It's a yearly.
It could be the same thing.
Yeah, but that's
It
not
could-
saying that
it
the
could be the
succession
same-
planning is gonna happen every year with specific titles and
It
names,
says it
which
in
I
the
don't
reports.
think is appropriate.
There is none, you just report we haven't done it.
Right, or continue the succession plan as it was last year.
Typically, in the first of the year, we would come to you in the past, mostly in firefighter hiring, and give you, tell you where we're going in the next year. Because we need to start the process. I'm not saying for all positions, we just did that with the org chart, for a number of management positions and so forth. But, historically, I know it's not all succession, it's entry level. We come back and say, here's where we are on staffing. So this, to Jenny's point, there's parts of this that would be difficult, but correct me if I'm wrong, my career development, that's in the policy and procedures manual that we're currently working on right now.
Correct.
So,
And I would just ask if we do this, it makes more sense to tie it to the fiscal year, since that's when we
That's fine.
evaluate our staffing levels and our budgeting and have a better sense of where we're looking in the year-to-year projection versus January, since that's our mid-fiscal year.
Yes, sir. Great, thank you.
Could we ask them to make no change now and then have the
she
chief
wants staff to come back and
and
Yeah.
make a recommendation?
So then that means that the period will end after the year, as of now, before
It'll
we
stay
hear.
the way it is,
Right,
the red
until-
line will
right,
not be.
Yep, I got it. I know, I just
We'll
wanted
do
to
the year.
confirm that.
Okay, and then this is my last one. On page 50.
Come on, you always have one more question.
Well, at the bottom of page 50, I just don't understand, what the words mean here. It says pledge signed by each board member.
Well, that they have read and agreed to what the policies are relative to the document. So to sign it, that's all. That's what I meant.
This being the end of the procedures
That would be the
manual?
end, that would be, no, not the procedures manual, but this section here for information security procedures.
Well, that implies that if you don't sign it, you don't comply. I just, like everything in here, I think the minute you stand up and take the oath of office,
You should.
you buy into
Right.
this stuff. And I think to pick this one out would then sort of raise the question, well, what about the things I didn't sign up for?
Right.
All right, well,
I mean, I agree with Peter
usually
on that.
organizations, they have a,
Oh, you deal with bureaucracies, Rob.
you have
We wanna cut
this
part
item
of
here
that.
as one of the pledges that you sign, just like you signed that oath of office.
Did you think this one was more important than some of the other ones? Is that the point?
Just that it was an information security procedures, and I saw it.
Yeah, I would-
just wanted to.
I would
make
ask
it
you,
flow
I
more.
would ask you to not ask for this change.
There you go.
Because I
Thank
think
you.
if we stand up and take the oath of office, we're basically buying into
Jay,
the
you hear
policy.
that? We're gonna cross
Not
that
just,
out.
and not just the policy, but the law, Brown Act, all the
Absolutely.
California
Absolutely.
Constitution,
That's right.
all of that,
Okay.
federal standard,
We uphold the
everything.
Constitution also.
Okay, I'm done, thank you.
Call the question.
Well, wait,
I
Ron,
forgot what it
do you have
was.
any-
Hold up,
do
that's
you have
fine,
any
thank you.
suggestions,
There,
Ron?
there's an issue with an item that was presented on page 26. item number 5, with regard to responsibilities of the fire chief to the board.
26.
So for reporting,
It is a violation of employees' rights to confidentiality for the chief to report to you personnel investigations.
So the way it was written originally was okay.
Yes, I would remove
So take out
investigations.
investigations?
Correct.
Okay.
Which line are we on? or
Number
which-
5, on page 26 at the bottom, Chuck.
He's got it.
Thank you, I got it now.
Others?
Yeah, just one more,
But
quick
can
thing
I
about-
ask, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
just because I'm trying to understand what you just said. We reported out publicly today that the board had followed up with CalPERS on a matter and so forth. That was something that was reported to the board. How is that different than what you're saying?
That was for a non-current employee, and that was prepared at the behest and direction of the board of directors. The board of directors is not the supervisor, nor does it have oversight over the employees of the district. The fire chief is who supervises those employees. Therefore, the board is not entitled, nor do employees believe that the board is involved in sort of employee disciplinary matters. That's something that responsibility rests with the fire chief. Thus, it's not appropriate for the fire chief to report internal personnel matters to the board because the board doesn't have any oversight, authority, or purview over internal employee issues.
So, just the point is it was a former employee and not a current. That's the distinguishing factor for you?
That's, that it was a former employee, and second, that the board directed staff to have that investigation done.
So could the board have directed staff to do an investigation of an existing employee?
The board would have to report to me, the human resources matter, any allegations, and then I would be responsible for investigating those accordingly. And depending on the circumstances, we would determine how to report out.
Thank you.
Just one more time.
Now, there was one thing that I may not have done in red. That was one of Rob's add-ons that I neglected to add on the first time. Section 9.2. Shoot, it's not. Yeah, Rob wanted to add on this one part, as another, like, section 9.2 F. Yeah, sorry, Rob, I don't know why it's not in here. Do you know which one I'm talking about? Where you have during-
Section F, 9.2.
Yeah, it says during our prior board meetings as classified as study, closed, special, or regular sessions, a 5-minute limit period will be imposed to each fire board member for discussion purposes. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, and I thought I included it in here. And I'm sorry that it's not in here, because I was working off of 2 separate copies, so, and I didn't want you to think I forgot about it.
Oh, no, it's in.
It's in the frame I'm looking at.
Yeah.
It's not in my version.
so the version that you have, the printed copy was sent out last week. That was the correction you sent us that was put in Sire, but there's not a new packet. In other words, that if you were to look at Sire tonight, you'd see it.
Okay, I'm sorry, because it's
Well,
not printed off.
Because by
If it's not in the
Wednesday,
packet, and for some, I can't deal with what's not in front of me.
Right.
And if this is not a complete document, then I would propose that we defer action on it.
that was, I guess, missed or whatever, it brought to staff's attention after the packet.
How many other things are like that?
Just this one that
Well,
I,
there's also the legal counsel will come back.
Well, that's, understand that, but I just want to make sure that, I don't want to be dealing with this document. In fact, there's 7 other things or 10 other things that are on Sire. If this is the only one, then I'd like to have Robin and Virginia talk about it, and we can decide whether to do it.
So the clerk is saying, yes, that's the only one, because the packet went out on Wednesday, and this was discovered when Director Solana brought it to our attention that it was not in the packet.
right, that's the one that I.
Okay, and what you're proposing is?
I put everyone has it.
Did you read it?
I can read, do you want to read it, Ron? I can read it, I got it here. Do you have it in front of you?
Yeah.
Okay, why don't you read it?
During our fire board meetings, it's classified as study closed, special, or regular sessions. A 5-minute limit period will be imposed to each fire board member for discussion purposes. If any fire board member wishes to continue the discussion over his or her limit, a majority of the sitting board members can afford that board member or members any additional time to discuss the item up for discussion. Without the needed majority to continue the discussion, the fire board president can move the item for further discussion to another meeting, vote on the measure, or table the measure for another meeting. Tabling or moving the item to another meeting for further discussion or consideration must have a motion, second, and a majority vote of the board of the president.
I would suggest that that is already provided for. We have a section in here on rules of order during the meeting.
Article 9.
And there is a section in here which is called it says right in section 9.5. Is this new language or existing language?
No, it's existing.
Because that's existing, but what Rob's proposing is new.
Well, why is 9.5 doesn't cover that issue?
It's just a little bit more specific, that's all.
Yeah, I would prefer to stay with what we have, given that
That's fine.
the other thing we have is a motion to call the question. So, let's say as I often do, go on the plane. You can call the question. And then in calling the question, then the president says, okay, how many people want to call the question?
That's fine.
So you can cut me off.
No, leaving it more generalized,
Okay.
is fine.
Okay. Can I call a question? Or
No, one more last change.
One more word.
It's just on page 56 with the committee assignments. Under emergency preparedness, it should be Director Bernstein and Director Irons and not Solano. Because Chuck and Rex are on that.
That's what it was at the beginning of the year.
Right. Emergency preparedness committee.
Fine. I don't see that as a red line here, so.
No, I know, because
Oh, I see.
I didn't know that, anyway, I didn't do that.
Oh, sorry.
For some reason, I thought Ron was still on there.
Okay, fine.
Chuck was.
Yeah, no, I know, that's why I wanted to make that statement.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm fine with everything.
Okay.
So call the question.
Call the question.
Call the question, look
Are you
at
gonna
it.
change those? or-
And hope Michelle's got all these little things done.
I've got, so we can compare notes too, Michelle.
I don't know, is that, can we discuss that? Because
So you're doing you're doing it right now, so if you call the question, this is the list, unless you want to change it again.
He can change it at any time.
Right.
You know, this is a living, breathing document. What we're saying is, once a year, we look at it, we make major changes. There's nothing to preclude us. When council comes back with a question on the other issue, we can deal with that.
You're calling, you talked to George Crowley. So.
Yeah, why don't we just call, we can always change this. I'm not worried about that.
Okay.
But it's,
Well, to be quite frankly, I mean, I look at this and that we put somebody someplace, and I think you're absolutely right. Is if there happens to be an issue in some place else, if somebody has an expertise, it would make sense to ask them to go there and talk to somebody using their expertise. I mean, if you were talking about hospital care, I'm probably not the guy you might be. Or you
Well, I
might
think-
be,
And I
because you
think
sit on those
the
committees.
whole concept about these committee assignments is that we, the board, elect a president, and there are a number of things that were within the discretion of that person. And these are the kinds of things. And at any moment in time, we have committee assignments.
Yeah.
Yeah, something happens, I get sick or sick of a particular assignment,
particular person, right?
So I called the question.
It's been moved and seconded. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Aye.
Okay.
Thank you for all your work.
Oh,
Input.
thank everyone. Mine's next.
We have one other item, and that's two, excuse me. We have Director Carpenter
I'm
request
before Rob on this one.
for the approval process of the fire district management modifying following primary response plans.
Yes, we have a board resolution which specifies what are the primary response routes. And under the state fire code, and Chief, correct me if I misstate this, if a local jurisdiction like Menlo Park or after in East Palo Alto wishes to make a traffic change on one of our primary response routes, they have to receive the concurrence of the fire chief.
Not
That's our
exactly
resolution.
correct.
No,
What is it?
no.
That's what the resolution says.
That, in chapter 5 of the Uniform Fire Code, the way the state's adopted, the state did not adopt that chapter identifying that. While it is in the code, the state itself hasn't adopted. Therefore, our action is that we recommend the city of Menlo Park adopt chapter 5, those specific sections with modifications as we wrote, to adopt that as a local ordinance. When the fire code's adopted, not all the 60 some odd chapters are
Right.
adopted in entirety.
So
They
where
pick
does-
and choose the ones they want.
So
And-
where does our resolution stand in terms of
Well,
its
so
validity?
Menlo Park is a unique exception because Atherton, East Palo Alto, and San Mateo County have adopted the ordinance, right?
They have to adopt the code. They have no choice on that, the ratified code from the state. The ordinances that we added to it, the additions and the chapters and the specificities for our fire district, 3 out of the 4 jurisdictions adopted its entirety. The one the board originally adopted here, version 1. Menlo Park,
Excuse me.
you do that next week. The one that's up at the city council right now, the one that's going through the process right now is version 2.1, which we're asking the city to take a view of it first. Once they've agreed that they're going to accept it, we bring that back to our board to say, this is the one we want the board to adopt for the city of Menlo Park, version 2.1. Then it goes back to the city council for finalization, because they cannot adopt one unless our board has approved it. We don't want the board to approve it first until they've said yes, in good faith they're going to adopt it.
There is concerns about that specific section that you're talking about from
Although-
the city of Menlo Park.
Although we've written language and working with their staff, that right now is an amicable solution to that specific area that I also identifies includes our primary routes of travel. And in our amendment, we said we will jointly approve those areas in our,
The reason I put this on the agenda is that for a future meeting, I would like a recommendation from the staff as to how the fire district goes about approving changes to primary routes in our underlying jurisdictions. Because what's happening is each of the underlying jurisdictions has deferred that responsibility to their elected officials. And I would like to strengthen the chief's hand so that in those discussions, they say to him, well, we want to do this. He says, fine, I'll take it to my board. So that we have the authority, so he consents with our advice and consent. And the resolution isn't clear as to, our resolution is not clear as to that he should obtain the advice and consent of the board before he consents to a change on the primary response routes.
3 of the 4 jurisdictions already consented to the fire district having the authority and approval of the
But that's
road-
not,
of
I'd
the
ask Michelle
roadways.
to have the resolution here, and I don't think we do have it. I could probably pull it up. But the resolution says, speaks to the fire chief, it doesn't speak to the fire board. And that's what I would like you to revisit.
Okay.
That's all.
It's just a little change.
He was talking about Menlo Park, you're talking about Atherton? Is that-
No, I'm talking about all the jurisdictions.
Okay.
The resolution that we adopted is a map. It shows and a table that shows the primary response routes. And said before there's a traffic control measure implemented on any of these by the underlying jurisdictions, it has to be done with the concurrence of the fire chief. And I'm suggesting we revisit that and say that, and the advice and consent of the fire board, so that we don't put the chief in a position where he has to counter a position of an elected body, and we're not there to back him up.
And historically, Director, Dr. Bernstein, for your information, unfortunately, we were probably a decade or two remiss in not having something like that, because many of these traffic control devices, the jurisdictions pretty much put them in without either very little or no discussion with the district, to the point where we actually would discover them on emergency response calls, find out, like in Menlo Park, East Menlo Park streets have been blocked. And it's crazy some of the things that have been done.
Well, when I met with city council members from Menlo Park, one of their big issues was that they didn't, it's one of the reasons they hadn't approved the fire bill, they told me, was because they didn't want the fire district telling them what to do about traffic. And I didn't realize that was excluded from their version at this
No,
point.
it
Well, it's not
is
excluded,
included,
but-
it is included in their version, it's modified. Chapter 5 states that technically, the ratification of that and the approval and adoption of it states that the fire district will now have virtually total authority over the roadways for approvals. Technically, technically, the version with Menlo Park, and rightfully so, they've said, well, we're not willing to allow that to go through, but we're willing to work with you on it, and we've worked with them to come up with something that actually meets our intent and need, and we're actually going to have a better final version working with them. It's going to be a mutual agreement. They're working with us. It doesn't yield their total authority to
I
us.
hope I share your view that it's better, but I'll wait and see.
But two other
It is
items.
for both sides. It's best for both sides.
One of the things that
I remain willing to be convinced. I'm skeptical of anything that comes from that staff being in our interest, so.
We have
It's based on many years of
very good,
experience.
we now have a very good working relationship with the majority of the members of staff. We have a good relationship with subject members of staff, but now it seems to be moving much better,
Great.
much faster, and a very, very amicable working relationship.
Is that because they have new people?
We have a better relationship with Menlo Park staff today than we had yesterday.
To your point, Director, yes, because people left and so newer people are more open. But the other thing we're looking at with IT is also trying to do some sort of video production, because part of what you just brought up is there's an ignorance and misinformation that exists regarding the district's trying to do things and take over control. The district's only trying to do things to make sure that we have timely responses. And the adverse impact in these jurisdictions is everything they add in compounds. So every speed bump, every chicane, every round, all those things slow down the biggest things, which are fire engines and fire trucks. So I don't think they really understand that. And I think some of the information I know you and I discussed, which is that 50% of the streets we were trying to, look at. Chief Rione, I looked at that, and quite honestly, it's much less than that. Remember, these are only the main arteries, and when you take Menlo Park and pull it out of the rest of the district map, there are very few streets that we're asking to have no control devices going forward on. Some of them already exist. And we're going to be slow to people's homes and responses. And I don't think people really understand how it works, because, and again, hopefully this video production will show not just what the compounding effect, but what it looks like when the fire truck has to slow down both inside the cab at the ground level. These pieces of equipment take a beating from these devices that are put in. I got to tell you, in your family vehicle, you probably don't even notice it. If you're in that engine company or truck, you definitely notice that that's there, and it slows us down. And that's, if that's the decision by the community to do that, that's one thing. But I don't think most people understand from one point to the next how it slows us down, that one area decides to have something, another area has nothing.
And there are good design solutions which can achieve both.
Correct.
For example, in Palo Alto, there are a number of areas where they have blocked off roads, but the block off was cut out in such a way that a fire apparatus can go right over it.
Right.
And that's because they have their own fire department, they talk to each other.
So
And the
Harold,
cutouts are the right dimension for the fire apparatus.
Yes.
And that's the real way.
so Harold, with regard to item 21, the situation with Atherton, have they asked you for your thoughts?
Well, we have that discussion, when you're talking about El Camino, we're talking about Atherton Avenue or Fair
Well,
Oaks.
no, El Camino.
Well, El Camino, in terms of that discussion, Director Ianson, I think, referenced that we had with them. I mean, they're gonna move forward, I understand with their plan, it's a $100,000 cost to do
Their
a study.
study, right?
Yeah.
Correct, and we weren't,
But are they
we didn't say they
included?
couldn't do a study, but they did say to us that we would be included. And technically, I don't know if they even realized that the ordinance that they authorized by the council, it's not that they're allowing us to be involved, is the ordinance says we are
We have
involved.
to, we have to.
Yeah.
And we have to agree to the solution.
So I think it's just there's a misnomer.
So have you clarified that one?
Well, we had that discussion with them there.
Okay.
I mean, I told them that, and their response was to say, well, Peter doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, you know, I sent these two guys, and they just told the same thing, so.
Actually, we were, in the past, it was much more restrictive, and, because there was some tighter language. And Atherton specifically, I didn't realize until one point that we had that language. And then the fire chief became the butt of who they could blame things on when the public were complaining about traffic issues, and they said, we can't change it because the fire district won't agree to it. So, it was an easy out.
And we said, that's fine.
Yeah.
And in
But
many
we have
cases,
made great
wouldn't agree.
progress. I mean, there used to be a time, I guess Rex and I are probably the only two who remember this, when the town of Atherton had a building official who they designated as their fire marshal.
Like, really? Yes. And there was a grand jury
I
investigation.
love that. That was a long time ago.
Boy, that was fun.
Well,
We
it's that long
we did
ago.
not see the
Really?
plans for the town of Atherton. The plans for town did not come through our office for any of their building construction or fire code
And
requirements.
they wouldn't let us look at them because they considered them confidential. And that our firemen were not authorized to see confidential information.
Authorized by their fire marshal.
Yeah.
Their fire marshal.
But they're city.
By their city.
Or by-
Yeah.
okay.
The bad part about that is there's about, we think, 500 basements that were constructed that the district
We had no
never had
idea.
any.
Wow.
We have
And
no
now, of
idea
course,
whether
they
or not-
went to 0 on the square footage for sprinklers, but there's 500 holes in the ground, and some are really big, and
In
we've
our
never even
sprinklers.
seen.
Some of the, in Atherton during that period,
Yeah.
there were basements that were built to the lot line because there was no restriction, there's no setback for basements. So you've got a house that's sitting here, and then underneath it is a basement that's bigger than the house. And it's multi-story, not
And
just one
basically,
story.
the house is sitting on a pedestal.
Yeah, basically.
Today we had an outstanding relationship with their building official.
It is.
We're outstanding
Yeah, we've made
relationship.
great progress. I mentioned this because it is an evolving thing. I think it's a great credit to the management team here that they are constantly moving to improve it. But I think the board needs to stand behind the management team and make sure that, you know, they don't fold easily.
Well, I mean, traffic mitigation is it's a huge issue, because as more and more people are using cut-through routes, there's more density, more vehicles. You know, I mean, we're caught up in this, you know, for a variety of reasons, but there's a whole different group of people that, you know, don't want to see people speeding or going through the neighborhood. And actually, we support that. We don't want to see people get hit by vehicles. At the same time, we need to go somewhere. We need to get there as quickly as we can.
I sent you that thing on North Fair Oaks.
Yeah.
How, does that impact our service area?
Well, North Fair Oaks is going to impact our service
Yeah.
area.
It's one of our
And
it's
and
one of our
that's, again, the
responsibilities.
county just adopted the ordinance that we have, so I'm a little, I don't understand how there's no knowledge, because I was already being contacted, and I think I discussed this with the directors. It's, you know, I understand the Board of Supervisors, when they reach out, you know, I understand that they're driving some of these things, but at the end of the day, it's not a matter of driving it, it's inclusion in the fire district, because.
Had they told you anything about
We've
that?
only heard that they're going to do things.
That's when I had
I'll keep
contacted,
sending you stuff.
that's when I had contacted the chief to talk about
Right.
the Fair Oaks projects.
Yeah, well, that's,
So with my meeting with Warren Slocum, to say that if it doesn't affect the actual safety routes, and to confer with the chief and staff.
Okay,
So-
well, my request is to be put on a future agenda if you could accomplish that. Probably accomplished a lot more. Thank you for your patience. And I've exceeded my 5-minute limit.
So call me the question, please.
You owe me time next time. All right.
Richard Solano's on.
22.
Yeah, 22.
No, we asked for, that it be a request for approval. Did we make a motion?
Well, no, actually, all I've asked to do is bring this up today as a director item for a future agenda.
Okay.
Are we comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Just direction to staff.
And
that's for the approval
You asked for a
process.
recommendation from staff, and that's what we'll do, go back and look at this, so.
Okay. So that brings us to item 22, request from Director Solano to have the district represented on the City of Menlo Park's M2 Project Committee.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. She put this on the agenda because I had emailed him, since there is a zoning hearing that's coming up on the project. We have Station 77, we have responsibilities in that particular area, and I just wanted to put it on the agenda so we could direct staff in order to follow it and to report on
Council
it.
committee, or is it, what is it? You say the M2 project committee. Is
It's
that a city manager committee or a council committee?
It's a, let's see, it's the building of what?
They've hired a consultant.
Right.
So they're going through a process in the M2, which is the area where Facebook and the Bohannon project, yeah, everything pretty much on the other side of the freeway. So, you know, the good news is they're finally getting some attention down there, I'm guessing because of everything going on, but there's been concern for years that not only that it be rezoned, but they run fiber and other things, and I'm sure the business owners out there or the owners of the property or land are driving part of this. So I don't know where it's going to go. I think when, David Bohannon got his project pushed through, which, as you know, we were not successful, which I think is what Director Solano's point here is, in getting any kind of modification to our apparatus. In fact, it wasn't even acknowledged that by changing the FAR, the floor area ratio, and the height out there would have an impact on the engine company that we have out there. Maybe we needed a different level of service delivery. So none of that was acknowledged and none of that was addressed, except for an impact fee, a joint cost share for an impact fee study. That was the only thing related to the M2 area or that project that occurred. So I think what Director Solano is trying to do is make sure we're on top of it this time, because there probably is going to be some big changes out there.
Yeah. My strong advice, having spent a lot of time in the last few months on this Station 6 thing, is make sure, I think it's great that we have good informal communications, but make sure that we document them. One of the most helpful things in that was Tim's letter in November of 2011. Because you're able to hand it to people and say, wait, we told you about this, we asked you to do it, etc. And recollections of conversations don't carry the same weight.
That's right.
So I would just encourage the staff, with the help of council, etc., on issues like this, to make sure we communicate in writing with the City of Menlo Park and say, we see you're going forward, this is what we want. We'd like to be involved here, as Rob suggested, and that doesn't preclude a conversation, but it just makes sure that the written record is there. Because I had the mayor look at me and say, wait a minute, you guys never raised this. And I said, no. I said, here's the letter. Oh, well, that was before my time or something.
Yeah.
Or a different town city manager, whatever.
Usually is.
So I just urge you to
Just
just
to memorialize it.
paper up when you're dealing with that jurisdiction.
And I know to the one point on here, I don't know if Director Solano, if you want to be that person, but I know it's either I know the liaisons, we just went through the board policy manual, but whoever the board liaison is for Menlo Park, I'm gonna be happy to work with them on that, so.
I think that makes the most sense.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe they'll find that information, I don't, so.
I just may be there as a resident because I got the planning notice in
That's
the
in
mail.
your backyard.
Yeah. Yeah, you should, the airline here.
I can go there as a citizen.
I know we have a lot on our plate for the July 29th board meeting, but I made a note to take a little bit of time and talk about kind of what I would like to have agendized, kind of what I would like to do with some liaisons, which we had talked about before, is using the expertise, not necessarily just the person that's in the seat, using some of that. So we'll talk about that.
Great. July 29th is a
So we'll
special.
need an open session item and a closed session item
Oh,
right
So
now.
July the 29th is,
So we just blocked out from 5 o'clock on, and you
Yeah.
guys decide
yeah.
how much is
So
closed
we
and
will
how
make
much
an
is open.
agenda, and we already know a couple of items that are on that agenda, so we will put that on there. Doesn't have to be a long thing.
and was there going to be some discussion of what the next meeting changing or something? Or do we not need to discuss that?
Well, we got a notice from
That's-
Michelle
That's the August meeting.
indicating that there was an issue which needed to be dealt with later. I communicated back and said, I'm gone. I've based my travel plans on being here for the 19th. And I'll be in England. My suggestion was that we proceed with the 19th, and if there's a single item that has to be dealt with later, you do it with a special meeting.
Yes, I agree.
So the 19th meeting is still on, is that?
I hope so.
As
She's
of right
asking.
now, it's still on. I'm trying to work out the details. As soon as I confirm one way or another, I will let you guys know.
Is it, I mean, is it,
So there is an item that our accountant Fariba needs to work on. It's from what I understand, it's the 13-14 fiscal year end report. And she will not have it ready by the August 19th board meeting. So she's requesting that we move it back a week to August 26th. Because it'll be, if we move it to September, it'll be too late for the auditor's deadline for some reason.
okay, if we have a regular board meeting on the 19th and everybody makes it, and we need to have a special board meeting before the 26th, we'll still have a
Or-
quorum because we'll be minus Director Carpenter.
Or just, from what I understand with Fariba, it doesn't have to be the 26th, it just, before the 15th of September.
Yeah, I could call in for a brief call, so I'm gonna be in England, it'll be 8 hours difference. So if you wanna have a short special meeting, I will either look at the agenda and say, hey,
We'll figure it
I
out.
defer to my colleagues to use your
And
judgment.
when do you get back?
I get back to 2nd, which is after her deadline.
So if we look at it and said that, hey, committee meetings are usually on the first one, I think that is the
The
second
first
or third, isn't it?
is Monday, the Labor Day.
Yeah.
If you work through the clerk to give your availability, then we'll figure it out.
Okay,
But so for now, the
Like
regular meeting is a
Mondays.
regular date.
yeah.
So can I just, so for the July 29th meeting, can we just bring back and finalize the P and P at that point since there aren't that many changes? Which also means that you'll have to give us legal.
We're going to have a full agenda just dealing with.
Yeah,
Just dealing with the one thing.
Well, we could finalize the P and P in August, doesn't matter to me.
I would suggest waiting till August,
Okay.
just knowing that even 2 or 3 small changes to the PMP could eat up half an
Take
hour of
it
time,
down.
and I think it'll be better to dedicate that meeting.
maybe like the sky's gonna fall.
Right, that's
And you have-
fine.
And you've designated 3 hours on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yes, yeah.
can I just get a recap of these dates, just so I have everything? July 29th, there is a special meeting. There is an open session item regarding the liaisons, correct?
Yeah,
And then a closed session item regarding labor negotiations. And that is going to start at 5 p.m.
yes.
That's gonna take.
And I'm figuring, I may be wrong, but I'm figuring 15 minutes for, at the most.
Then the August 19th regular board meeting will have our regular agenda items as well as items
Except
that
the
we.
Verbrina item.
Right, and then I am going to schedule a special meeting either the last week of August or first week of September for the year-end report.
What's our normal committee meeting days in
August 5th,
Philadelphia?
or September, I'm sorry, September, it would be, for September, it would be September 2nd.
The day after Labor Day.
Do it then.
Are you guys available then?
Do we have a quorum available?
I get back the
We
night
have a
of the
quorum,
first.
yeah, because the only one will be missing is Director Carpenter.
I'll be back the night of the first.
We'll be back from that.
I'll be back.
So September
First.
2nd?
Right,
Okay.
because I think you got it.
So I will schedule the special meeting regarding the year-end report for September 2nd
Right.
at 5 p.m., 7 p.m., 2 o'clock.
How long?
How long will we need?
I would assume.
That's hard to say at this
Yeah.
point.
3 days.
Does it go to the finance committee before?
I don't think so. I think it's just a report that the board needs to approve so she can give it to the auditors.
But you may want to spend some time, obviously.
Could we do it at 5 o'clock?
Yeah, works for me.
5 o'clock? Okay.
Sure.
Okay, great.
Perfect, thank you.
August the 2nd.
Thank you.
Okay.
I love the collegial nature of this.
So that brings us to public comment number 3.
So I have a question.
Yes.
If memory serves me correctly, last month a question was posed as to the disposition of the standing committees with the exception of finance. Are they real or are they imaginary?
They're real.
But there's nothing scheduled in August, so maybe it's a summer break, which is fine.
Isn't necessarily summer break, it's just that we've got so much other stuff that kind of takes a priority.
Just question curiosity.
Yeah. We're hoping that some of this other priority stuff gets taken care of and moved forward so we can get back to all of our regular business.
Mr. President.
Move to adjourn. Second, all those in favor, I heard it.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Ron. Ron?
You're a bulldog, I love it.
I like it.
4 years up here, how'd you?
I know.
Oh, right there.